Hey, what's up guys? Today I want to do a quick video, a short little tutorial, and I want to talk about how the meter in your camera works. Okay, have you ever taken a picture that when you got it back it looked like this? You had this beautiful snow scene and it turned out really dark and dingy. Technically it was underexposed. Well, there's a reason why the image ended up looking like it did when you have a scene like that. In most of our cameras, the metering system in the camera is what's known as a reflective meter. In other words, it measures the light that's reflecting off of the scene that we're shooting. As opposed to an incident meter, which is one of these. I don't know if you guys have ever used one of these. An incident meter measures the light that's falling onto our subject. Now, with a reflective meter, being that it's going to measure the light reflecting off of our subject, it's going to take into account what that subject is. In the case of the image I just showed you, we had a lot of snow everywhere. Now, regardless of what kind of meter you use, when the meter analyzes a scene to give you the proper exposure, what the meter does is it tries to give you middle gray. Now, middle gray is halfway between black and white. I happen to have an 18% gray card, or Photoshop would call it 50% gray. Either way, it's right in between black and white. And the meter is trying to analyze the scene and give you that middle gray, assuming that's what the average scene is going to be. Now, if your scene is, 95% snow, it's obviously much lighter than 18% gray, and a reflective meter, because it meters the light reflecting off of that scene, can get fooled. And that's what's happening. It ends up analyzing that dominantly white scene, thinking it should be gray, and gives you a reading that underexposes the scene. Likewise, if you had a very dark scene, it's going to analyze that, think it's gray, and it's going to give you a reading that's going to overexpose that scene. Now, with modern cameras today, I know they have a lot of technology upgrades and things that a meter can do, face detection and stuff, to give you a better reading than old school cameras even 20, 30 years ago. But I'm going to do a little demonstration that shows that even today's DSLRs and today's cameras can get fooled by a simple scene. Okay, so what I'm about to do is go outside. I'm going to take a picture of a black item on a black background, and I'm going to shoot a white item on a white background. And I'm going to do 3 different ways of metering it. I'm just going to meter straight out of the camera and take the first shot with whatever the meter tells me it should be. The second shot, I'm going to do an incident light reading, and I'm going to take the shot at whatever that says. And then the third shot, I'm going to use the reflective meter in the camera, but I'm going to hold a gray card in front of my subject and meter just off that gray card. Because if the meter thinks it's going to see 18% gray, I'm going to show it 18% gray, and I ought to get an accurate reading. In fact, I ought to get the same reading that I get with the incident meter, because the incident meter, since it measures light falling onto the subject, shouldn't be fooled by what's behind it. And I think it'll make a whole lot more sense once we do it and you see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here I have a black flashlight on a black grill in my backyard, and I'm pointing the camera at the scene and simply taking the reading that the camera gives me, which is 1/8 of a second at f8, and here's the result. And then in the second shot, I use an incident meter pointing the dome back towards the camera, and I get a 1/30th of a second at f8, 0.2, 0.2 of a stop above f8. And there were the results. And then the last shot, I'm going to take a meter reading from the camera off the gray card, and I get a 1/30th of a second at f8, and there's the results. And again, the results from not using a gray card, just pointing the camera at. And you can see quite a difference. And then a white on white scene, there's that. And straight from the camera, I get a reading of 1/60th of a second at f8. And here's the results from that. And then I take the second shot with the incident meter, point the dome of the meter back towards the camera, and I come up with a 1/60th of a second at 569, which is essentially f8. And there's the results. And for the third shot, I get the same reading as I got with the incident meter reading using the reflective meter in the camera off of a gray card. 60th of a second at f8. And then again, I'll remind you what it looked like when I was just pointing the camera at the scene. That gave me 1/60th of a second at f8, much darker, underexposed. Okay, so let's do a little diagram. Let's say that our camera's right here. We'll draw an old school bellows camera. And our subject is over here. And the sun is up here. And the light comes down and hits our subject. When it reflects off the subject, the meter in our camera measures the light reflecting off. So the reflectivity of whatever this person might be wearing or whatever our scene is going to affect the light that comes off of here. Now, if the same scene I come and hold my handheld meter right here and I put the dome of the meter pointing back towards the camera, it's going to measure the light that's falling on the scene and get a different reading because it doesn't base its findings on whatever my subject is. Okay, so now that you have an understanding of what your meter is thinking and why you're getting the results you're getting, the big question is, how do we fix it? If you don't have a gray card to pull out of your bag and meter off of, and you don't have a handheld meter, you only have the meter in your camera, there's really 3 ways you can fix it. Number one, you can just open up or close down your exposure like I did in the little example. You can use ISO, aperture, or shutter speed to change your exposure. The other way you can do it, and I think all cameras have this, they work different ways, is what's called exposure compensation. So if you're in a aperture priority mode or shutter priority, one of the program modes, you can simply change the dial plus or minus however much you want, and the camera will automatically take the reading that it gets, and it'll compensate however much you dialed in, plus or minus. So if you're photographing a bride in a white dress in front of white columns in front of the church, and you know it's going to underexpose that, you can automatically give it an extra stop of exposure with the compensation dial. That's a really easy way to do it on the fly. And the third way to do it is you can fix it in post. I know that's a lot of people's go-to way to fix it. I'll tell you though, if you're striving to be a serious amateur photographer and certainly a professional photographer, fixing it in post is not the way to do it. All the sliders and things that we have in Photoshop and Lightroom are wonderful, but yeah, no, we want to get it as close to perfect in camera as we can. So exposure compensation or just simply adjusting your exposure is the way to go. Okay guys, that's about all I got today. I hope it helped a little bit to give you an understanding of what your meter's doing, and so you can understand what it's doing and what it's telling you so that you can make the most out of your photography. As always, I greatly appreciate you watching. Like the video, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks guys.